Welcome to Tales from the Golden Imp. I am Joe Craig, the Emperor's Skald. In this episode, we try to discover what happened to Meg and what these women want with her. We also see what the effects of the siege is having on the city of Durg. Will Dandros discover that he is a Warsmith? And what of this court wizard? Will they be able to help Regos? We have many questions to answer. And with that said, welcome to Tales from the Golden Imp. Episode 16, The Lost. Regos awoke to a loud popping sound. Rise and shine, just no time to sleep. It is time for the learning. The voice that called out was from a gray-haired dwarf dressed in black robes with an orange trim, standing around 3'8", with a slender build which didn't seem to fit a dwarf all that well. The dwarf came into the small chamber and walked up to the podium that was in front of this makeshift classroom. Regos had been burning the candle at both ends, and if the candle had a third end, that one too. Between trying to track down Meg, working with this wizard, and trying to take advantage of his access to actual books of magical theory, Regos had been pushing himself beyond his limits. All of this was important, however. It had been 2 weeks since Meg disappeared, and still no sign of her. They had leads, but so far none had produced their friend and comrade. It's not to say that the guards of Durg hadn't been helpful. They truly had. It was almost as if Meg just disappeared. They had a face to go from. One truly troubling thing about that face, the eyes. The woman had purple eyes. The eyes were not the color of amethyst, but more akin to a darker purple. It still pointed to some form of psychic ability. So, what could this woman want with Meg? And where could they have taken her? Realizing that there was no time for that now, Regos had to push these thoughts to the side yet again, knowing that Vira would not allow him to continue his revelry much longer. Master Vira Klopt indeed was ready to begin the studies for the day. Are you ready for the learning, Journeyman Regos? We don't have much time to get you caught up. Regos snapped to the center, knowing that this was the last warning that he was going to get his head prepared for what was to come. Master Klopt was jovial and had a very good teacher, but demanded so much from him. He hadn't been pushed like this since his early days at Natura Adoro. Yes, Master Klopt, I'm ready for the learning, Regos said while stifling a yawn, while opening his journal to a fresh page. He would have to rewrite his notes at some point in time. Between his personal studies and the teaching methods of Master Klopt, his notes were a mess. She was an excellent lecturer, but didn't fully depend on it. There was a balance to this instruction between lecture and practical application of magic. Master Klopt smiled at Regos, and with a slight laugh. Perhaps you should clean your face first, before the formula for arcane lock is permanently etched on your face. Regos wiped the ink from his face and used a touch of magic to clear the rest of the way off, before she became fully frustrated with him, or worse, amused. With that, they set into the lecture. The learning had begun. Regos was instantly awake. Time seemed to be an illusion here in Durg. The whole day and night, the city was alight with a dim light that just seemed to be everywhere. This was due in part to the enchanted lanterns that seemed to be placed in every hallway, alley, or street for the city. Jaina was having a hard time adjusting to this constant twilight. Spending her time following leads and working with the city guard, trying to find Meg was taking much of her attention. So far, the siege of the city hadn't changed much for the people of Durg. The biggest difference was the food. The city had strict guidance on what food was available to each and every inn, tavern, and eatery in the city. They were preparing for a long siege, but they knew aid was coming. That was fine and all, but it didn't help Meg, nor lead them any closer to finding her. Jaina had an image and a few leads, but that was really it. Friar Burduli had put her in contact with a lady named Migs that seemed to know Meg pretty good for the short amount of time that she'd been in the city. Jaina didn't care for Migs very much, but she was well connected with the city. Honestly, a little too connected with the underbelly, but that's what they needed here and now. They needed to find where someone was hiding within the city. They had proof that the trio of women were not able to leave the city with Meg, but that was over a week ago. How much could change in a week? They knew now that they were looking for 3 women. They had attempted to leave the city via the mines, but their access to the mines was barred by a group of scoundrels. One Civ von Cleve had made sure that no one that he didn't know left the city. Keeping everyone in the city was the safest bet, as the exit to the caves was still one that put many in harm's way. Jaina wanted to be at the southern gates participating with the battle there. The goblins had figured out many of the defenses that the south had to offer. There was a constant back and forth of the battle, just enough to keep the goblins from getting comfortable. The first soldiers to reinforce that front should be showing up any day now. Jaina would be wasted there, so her efforts was focused on finding Meg. Meg had nearly vanished without a trace. And had the women not tried to leave via a guarded exit, Meg would be lost to them now. Praise Hallis that they had. Now she searched. So far, her searches had led her to find a wagon that they used to abduct Meg along with Meg's possessions, aside from her weapons. That was an interesting bit of information. Meg's backpack with all of her stuff was found, but none of her companions had been in her bag, so they couldn't tell if anything else was missing. But the kukri and khopesh that she carried was missing for sure. Why would her captors keep weapons and nothing else? It all seemed odd to Jaina. But from the wagon, the city guard was able to glean some additional information about the women that they were seeking. They sought 2 half-elves and a human. The 3 women seemed to be working together quite well, and they captured their quarry. But they needed to get their prize out of the city if they were going to deliver them to wherever she was trying to get to. The only thing that gave Jaina hope was they were most likely still in the city, but for how much longer? Between Civ and Migs, they had managed to stop their exit from not only the mines, but another secret exit, and neither of them would have revealed to Jaina. They were a frustrating pair of people to work with, but they had been effective. With the number of refugees in the city, many vacant buildings were now occupied, with frustrated people from the cities of Kievstown and Port Skara. Believe it or not, that actually helped Jaina with what she was doing now more than they would realize. It helped because it limited the number of places the group could hide. They were striking women from reports that made them stand out, though they were striking because of the lack of elves and half-elves in the city. They were attractive women from reports, but plain, nondescript kind of way. They would make excellent assassins. But Jaina was thankful that they were not. Otherwise, Meg would have been found dead instead of abducted. Jaina was running out of steam. She had been awake for what she suspected for a couple of days. She would finish searching this sector, then she would have to retire back to Tina's to get some rest. She couldn't push herself much harder. It was truly too much. As she looked through the window of the inn, she gave pause. Dust had been disturbed here, and just like that, her attention focused and her training took over. Drawing her glaive and lighting it up with that golden light that Hallis, she wanted to enter the dwelling. Someone had been here, Could it have been Meg and her captors? Jaina would find out. The forge fires were intense. The glow from the lava that fueled the forge was shining on the face of Dandros. Working with metal wasn't his way. But this wasn't normal metal. This was a strange metal that fell from the sky. It was so hard to work with, the heat required to make the metal malleable. This metal was saved for only the highest ranked craftsmen, which made Dandros feel very weird with working with it. As the metal began to glow, the words of Master Melchior rang in his ears. Feel the metal, find the shape within. Each of your hammer strokes form the things that the metal seeks to be. Talk to the steel, sing to it if you wish. Find what it desires to be. Then you will find the metal will move to that shape easiest. When you're working with something difficult to work with, you'll need all the help you can get. Dandros moved the metal to the anvil and began to work it. The first few hammer strokes was to flatten out the steel and form it into an ingot. During this process, Dandros had the help of several others to hammer the metal. All of them followed Dandros' first strike. He led the charge, and the others hit right where he did. As the metal moved, Dandros realized that the metal wanted to curve, so he allowed it to. As the metal cooled back into the forge it went. The process was repeated over and over again until the ingot was formed. The ingot had a slight curve to it. From that point on, Dandros was on his own. While it heated once again, Dandros began to work a couple of formulae in his mind for what this metal could be. With the size of the piece of metal, he was thinking it could be a kukri or a glaive blade. Dandros continued to work the metal, and it continued to bend as he lengthened the blade, and he worked it into a form. As he did, Dandros found himself flowing energy into the blade. He was thinking about the enemies that they would face, and how much they would need these weapons to achieve victory. He prayed to Belden with each hammer strike, and as he did, energy flowed into the metal more. Strike after strike, Dandros focused this energy. He sought Belden's aid in forming this blade. Something about this blade made him worry about Meg, who had been missing for days now. He trusted Jaina, Captain Lahti, and the rest to find her. But he didn't know Durg any better than them. His whole time here before was spent at the temple. As he thought to Meg, he thought to her weapons and the kukri that she fought with. Over the next few hours, the kukri continued to take shape. Dandros' arm was burning by the time the rough shape of the kukri took form. Then he took it to the grinding wheels and began to give it its final form that it would take. Something within him was pushing this to completion. When he got beyond tired, he began to sing to the metal, the song that he grew up singing in the temple, his foot tapping the grindstone's pedal to the beat. The sparks were flying, and things were going slow. It had shape and form. Dandros had bled on this blade. Beads of sweat had dropped into the blade. He had given it its blood, sweat, and tears. He had given the blade his voice and his might. Now he gave it the songs of Belden. The whole time he focused his energy and the energy from Belden into this blade. He knew in his heart of hearts that this blade had to be just so. It had to be perfect, as this blade could be the only thing keeping them from failing. He treating the blade, bringing it to a polish. Dandros sang, fixing the handle to the blade and engraving a name on the blade. Dandros sang, wavering on his feet. He finished the blade, singing all the while. And once it was done, once he was finished, he fell silent and just looked at the blade. The bone handle that he used took him aback. The overall design of this kukri took him off guard. but all of that paired in comparison to the name he found engraved on the blade. It was elegant in Dwarven, but in Kheasurid it translated to Dragon's Bite, or Biting Dragon, depending on how you translated it. Though he was done with the blade, Dandros was not finished with the ritual that he had started. When he took up the stone that he found was a metal, he walked it back to the temple's heart. He presented the blade to the anvil that Belden himself used, and he placed the blade upon it for it to be judged. It was by far the greatest thing that his hands had ever made. He had never made a blade of metal. He had never made something that he truly saw as something that should be used in war. He had given it everything. Purpose was the only thing keeping Dandros upright. Kneeling before the anvil, wanting so much just to lay down and sleep, Dandros swore the oath that he was taught. He asked Belden to bless the blade, to destroy the enemies that needed to be defeated. He asked Belden to bless the blade, to battle man, beast, or even a god. Dandros didn't know if Callisto was back in the flesh and blood, or divine might, but he wanted to make sure that the blade could harm that monster. After the oath was spoken, Dandros then closed his eyes and slumped, but remained there. He sat and he waited. Now it was up to the hand of Belden to deem it worthy. Dandros could not open his eyes when Master Melchior took the blade to inspect it. He could not open his eyes when Master Melchior prayed to Belden to get the final blessing. He could not open his eyes when Master Melchior poured a special oil upon the blade and gave it one last wipe down before returning it to the anvil. It wasn't until Master Melchior left the chamber and returned that Dandros could open his eyes. It was that moment when Master Melchior said, "Arise, Master Dandros," that Dandros was permitted to open his eyes and rise. Standing at that moment was hard. Even with the surge of energy that coursed through his veins, he rose and kept his eyes lowered. Even with the honorable title issued, nothing was official until he was presented. A robe was placed over him. Sliding his arms into this robe, Dandros could not believe what was happening. He was guided to the steps of the forge, and upon his exit from the forge, bells rang. Special bells that were used when a master had earned a title. As the master craftsmen gathered in the square, below the forge's stairs, Master Melchior rose his hands to the crowd. Clearing his throat, Master Melchior called out. As Master Craftsmen gathered in the square below the forge's stairs, Master Melchior rose his hands and the crowd fell silent. Clearing his throat, Master Melchior called out. It was through trial and test that this man who lost his craft and cut his beard was called once more. His call was not a glove that fit. Now we have found the glove. We have found that craft. I call to you all today to say that we have something that hasn't happened in an age. Master Dandros of Smallwater, what is your craft? Dandros tried to call out loud and proud the words that he wanted to speak, but the words failed to come out. The only thing that came out was a cough. Clearing his throat, he called out with pride, "Warsmith!" His coughing was drowned out by the roar of the crowd that gathered below him, but he held the kukri, biting dragon, high above his head. As the crowd filled in to congratulate him, the first hand that greeted him was one that truly surprised him. With a hug around his waist, Dandros opened his eyes to find two very proud eyes staring at him. It was the eyes of his estranged wife, Silvia. "I'm so proud of you, Dandros. You found yourself again." Migs, what is the latest? Captain Esmine Lahti greeted this woman that quickly was becoming a friend. Migs was dressed in her normal garb now, flowing blouse with a corset and tight brown leather trousers. She was feeling at home now that she wasn't being forced to wear a billowing dress. She swore they put her in that dress just to humiliate her for kicks. The two women embraced in a hug before Migs started into her report. "Well, the rumor mill's certainly at it again. Gotten another lead to follow up about these women, but I think Jaina might be on that already. That woman is driven like nobody's business. She may need support if the rumors are true. There's an abandoned pub that some activity has been seen coming in and out. She's sniffing around it pretty good, and I think she's going to go in soon. That pub, it's reported that these women have been seen going to and fro. Beyond that, the northern gates, magical barrier still holds. Nothing more to report there. But the vault seems pretty pissed about the whole situation. And from the south, the battle rages on. The purple-eyed freaks seem to be missing again. So hopefully that doesn't spell trouble for us. Do you still have people watching out for Jaina? That woman wanting to protect people so much that she refuses aid is just frustrating." Lahti asked as the two women sat down at a small table in the attic room that they had been sharing. The room was just a small room in the inn within the city. Refugees had taken a lot of the rooms, but Mig knew everyone, it seems, and got them this room. Lahti had preferred it to the bunks that she was given by Frue. She needed to be closer to the action, and this was a perfect place to do that. Migs poured herself some wine. "Of course I do. 2 of your folk and a couple of mine. Depending on how these people fight, I thought a variety of styles would be beneficial. So how goes the War Council?" Lahti laughed a bit. "Frustrating to say the least. We had another emissary from Devolton call out for our surrender. This one was a bit more rude than the last, so our response was returned with the elf's head. I'd not seen the Frue but like that before. She removed the head herself. Not with one of those storybook clean strikes that takes the head clean off. No, she was cutting the spinal cord and through the neck bones with a knife that she was using to eat with. 'Here's my answer. Take it back, lest you end up like him,' was all she said. I see that Jaina and the Frue would get along very well. I pity anyone that tries to take Jaina as a bride. If anyone does, I fear they'll end up wearing the dress." Migs took a deep drink of wine, nearly finishing the cup. "Jaina's going to need some help, if she wants it or not. Honestly, I think she could use someone as skilled as you. But we have the numbers for us." Moving towards the window of the attic, Lahti looked out the window in contemplation. "Should we move to our location? You think the Vipers are still in the nest? In some ways, I hope they are. But it is a dangerous situation for Jaina. All of her friends are tied up with their own developments, which I feel they'll need if they have any chance to grow. And this is likely the only chance they'll have." Migs joined Lahti at the window. "I fear there might be. So it's your call. I've got my steel now so I can help out. If there's fighting, we storm in. What do you say?" Migs rested her hand on the rapier at her hip, wishing that she could say anything but what she needed to say. So much more she wished she could just retire to the bed. But this duty thing was a pain in the arse. Lahti thought for a moment. "Okay, I suppose we should go. I just don't want to alert anyone to the threat so we can actively catch them. It's been 2 weeks since Meg was taken and still haven't found her. So they've proven to be elusive at least. As Lahti turned, the closeness of Meg was a bit awkward. Not that Lahti minded. The moment was there, and it was shared when Migs stepped back. The moment was over. The two had spent a great deal of time together over the past month, and there was some emotions developing for sure. They didn't have time to explore these feelings right now. Migs helped Lahti don her armor and prepared to leave to potentially help Jaina if they needed. Once the breastplate was locked in place and a helm was on, Lahti was all business. She had an objective and had to accomplish it. She and her soldiers were not being used in the main battle to the south, but she continued to watch on the western front. Especially with the flightiness of the skull. That was concerning, and an attack from that front would not be expected. Tightening the sword belt and sword, Lahti began to march towards the door. Jaina would be in danger if the women were there. Migs fell in. Marching wouldn't be what it was called. There was far too much swagger in the movement. Migs was an attractive woman, and she knew it. And she wanted to be seen. She wanted to be remembered. And she would be with the way she walked. Jaina tried the door of the pub, and the door was locked. She knew that if she breached the door with physicality, it would give the women a chance to escape before she could get her hands on them. She contemplated her options as a truly ugly man walked up to her. "Don't worry, miss. I have you. Migs sent me to help out." This ugly man kneeled before the door and pulled some tools from his bracers on his wrist and began to work the lock. The man had slimy black hair that kept falling into his eyes, but his hands were deft as he pulled out a small needle from the lock. "That weren't there originally. I installed this lock, as old man Kelvin didn't ask for no needle traps." A few flicks of the wrist, a manipulation of the tools, and he was turning the lock. Slowly the man opened the door, catching the bell before it rang. The floor was covered with dust, save a trail from the door to the back room. Following the trail, the man led the way for Jaina. He moved forward to the edge of the next room before waving Jaina ahead. He was disabling a tripwire as Jaina clinked forward. Never had the woman been quiet, and now it was no different. The man disabled the tripwire, and noise was heard deeper inside the pub. They were entering the kitchen as the sound was heard from the trap door from the floor below. This set Jaina forward ahead of the man, and just as she reached the trap door, there was movement from above her. Not a sound was made save the sound of hands releasing from wood. That was the only sound the man needed to take action. He slammed into Jaina before a knife slid into her neck. The push from the man was just enough to move her clear of the blade. Jaina spun towards the would-be assassin, bringing the glaive down in a vertical strike. The dark-skinned, half-elven woman was spinning out of the way of the glaive and stabbing at the Savior. The Savior parried the stab. As he drew a pair of daggers, he began to fight back. The cramped space made the glaive a little cumbersome, but there was just enough room in the kitchen for a few good swings. The ugly man caught a slice across his forearm, making him drop a knife in his left hand. Jaina stabbing the glaive into the side of the assassin. The assassin didn't make a sound, though the blade was through her side from front to back. In fact, the assassin tore the blade free, spinning back on Jaina, punching at her with her left hand as a dark-skinned, half-elven woman punched. A dagger sprung forth from her loose clothing, and her aim was true. Jaina, expecting only a punch, didn't bother dodging, taking the chance to line up another slice with the glaive. punching dagger made contact with Jaina. As it did, a small canister popped free from the blade. The glaive, already in motion, had forced the man to duck the swipe, but he snapped forward, following the blade. Not a sound was uttered from the Silent One as the glaive found purchase. The assassin dropped the blade that she held in her right hand. A dagger found the neck of the assassin along with the soft space in the back where the kidney would be. In the light, her dark purple eyes faded to brown as the assassin hit the floor. No sooner than the woman hit the floor that Jaina began to spin. Realizing there was a chance that the blade she was struck with was poisoned, she placed hands on the wound and prayed to Hallis for the divine healing touch. She felt the wound close, but her head did not clear all the way. "You all right, miss?" the man asked. "There are 2 more of these women, weren't there? What do you need me to do?" Jaina heard the man, but was slow to respond. Who are you? Thank you for the help. We need to find Meg. I fear she's in that cellar down there." "Just call me Joseph, Miss Jaina. I'll open that door for us." "You all right to push on, miss?" answered the man as he moved towards the trap door in the floor of the kitchen. He knew the answer to the question and wasn't going to wait for a lie. She wasn't okay, and he knew it. Snapping open the trap door to reveal the stairs, he descended in darkness. "A little light, if you have that up your sleeve, would be much appreciated." Jaina nodded and focused her divine blessing to the blade of the glaive, and focused on that blade until it began to glow. It was a solid golden light that was produced from the blade. As the light shined into the open maw that set out before them, Joseph began to descend in the darkness. As his feet touched the cold stone of the cellar floor, the snap of a crossbow was heard. He tried to drop in time, however his reflexes were too slow. The bolt caught Joseph in the chest just above the heart. He spun with the force of the impact as he was already dropping. This put him on his belly and on the ground. He never felt the trip line that set it off, but he was feeling it now. Jaina came charging down the stairs as the snap of the crossbow echoed in the empty pub. She scanned the room for threats and didn't see anything of a threat in the room. But she did see something of note. In a heap on the floor was a form that looked like a body. After the room was cleared, Jaina checked on Joseph. Joseph said he was fine, so Jaina went to the downed form over in the corner. As the light shed on the form of a woman in the floor, was it Meg? Jaina rushed over to the form and pulled back the blanket that was covering her. As the blanket would pull free, a young woman was laying there, but it was not Meg. She was close to Meg, but it wasn't her. This young woman had short red hair and a dark complexion, but that's where the similarities ended. The woman was out cold, though. Removing the blanket just revealed a girl on a bed in the cellar. Joseph let out a groan as he pulled the bolt from his chest. Jaina touched the forehead of the woman and sensed that she was okay, but in a deep slumber. "You all right over there, Joseph?" "Been better, but nothing vital hit. Your healing hands would be appreciated once you've done checking on her," Joseph said as he inspected the wall of the cellar. He was investigating, looking for the source of that sound. As he felt along the wall, he found a stone that gave to his inspection. Pushing the stone, he found that it easily depressed into the wall. As it did, gears began to turn and move in the western wall, in which the stones was found to begin to move. The western wall rolled back beyond the stone of the wall and then mechanically slid north, revealing a passageway into the darkness. cobwebs in the corners, but the center of the passage was clear of any and all dust and cobwebs. Jaina pointed the glaive in the direction to get a little bit more light on the situation, and the tunnel continued beyond the light. Stone walls of the cellar continued on into the dark. "Jaina, you still in here?" came a call from above. The voice was that of Commander Lahti. "Yeah, down in the pantry below the kitchen. What are you doing here, Lahti? Got a woman down here, she's in bad shape. All seems safe at the moment." As Jaina called out, she moved over to Joseph to lay her healing hands on the wound. The footfall from Lahti and Migs, and a few soldiers that were on standby came down. All the while, the passageway's gears fired back up and closed the passageway. As the soldiers filed into the room, Jaina was greeted by Lahti and Migs. "We need to get her to safety. We have a passageway to explore. I think we have the first solid lead on locating Meg. We need to keep on the trail while the trail is warm. We also need to inspect the dead woman above to see what we can learn from her." Lahti nodded. "I've got 2 soldiers up there watching over the body. One of them is an inspector who is looking over the body. But are you okay? You seem more pale than normal." Jaina's stoic resolve was beginning to waver. She hated to admit it, but she was dizzy. "I was hit with a punching dagger, and I fear there could have been a toxin with it. I'm not feeling great, but doing all right for the moment. I can push on for now." Migs immediately approached Jaina and looked at her in the eyes, and raised the breastplate and put her fingers to the wound on the side. Though healed, Migs was feeling the heat off the wound and was looking for discoloration around the wound. Migs knew some of the poisons that were used in the trade. After feeling her side and getting a look in her eyes, the concern on Migs' face reduced. "Think you'll be alright, dearie. It'll pass. Not sure how long, but you'll have some dizziness with you for a bit." "Good to know. Yeah, I'm a bit dizzy, but feeling alright in general. Joseph, you want to open that passageway again?" Jaina leaned up against the wall above the woman on the floor. She was starting to perspire, and the dizziness was still spiking. "We also need to get this woman to safety. I don't think I'll be able to travel with you, so I'll guard her until we can move her." She then slid down the wall to sit next to the woman. The arrow whistled through the air and the darkness. This arrow had eyes. The green and golden feathers whistled in the breeze and found a home in the back of the head of a green-skinned goblin with a war horn in hand. The goblin fell in darkness that it called home. This home was not its home. The regiment of goblins were holding the gate of Kievstown hostage, and they had for 14 days. This was all about to change. This arrow was one arrow amongst a dozen that found their marks. Each arrow marked with the same green and golden feathers. The first led the others, and at the end of it, 13 goblins were falling to their deaths. They all nearly fell at once. Each arrow had its mark. The hands that loosed the arrows had belonged to elves that were originally marching to help the people of Malatin, but rerouted to the city of Durg when it was discovered that the forces of Durg needed their aid. As they took up their position in the ruins of the city of Kievstown, the archers had taken aim and found 13 marks. They were preparing to repeat this process. All the while, 475 soldiers moved into the mouth of the cave. That was the gates of Kievstown. These soldiers did not march, but they were in formation. They were all low, moving at half speed, waiting for the sound to tell them to charge the gates. Weapons in hand, they moved up the hill towards the gates. Arrows loosed, goblins died. And somewhere in the dark, an alarm sounded. Before the alarm notes could complete, leading the charge was an elven warrior with an ivory and gold horn that let out a blast of his own. As the horn sounded, these soldiers rose from their lowered march and began to charge up that hill. They were on the goblins before they knew what happened. The battle began. The goblins were rising from their beds, most of them in leather armor at most. As the elven horn sounded again, a javelin from the top of the hill was an answer. The horn blower caught the javelin in his shoulder, but that did not slow him down. He sounded the horn again, and his weapons were readied. The goblins looked upon the warriors that were ready, armed and charging. And if they did not have the high ground and the darkness to fall back on, they would have ran. If they didn't have a dwarven barricade at their backs, they would have ran. Didn't still have the words of Skald in their heads, they would have ran. Instead, they charged into battle. Arrows were released, and the bravest amongst the goblins fell, showing the soft belly of the charging goblin horde. Numbers were still on the side of the goblins. As the goblins charged down the hill to meet the elves in battle, the hornblower let loose 2 more short bursts, and the initial line all stepped to the left, stopped forward progress, revealing 2 lines of spearmen that set their spears against the charge. The horde could not change tactics that quickly. The goblins in front, seeing the spears, were unable to stop as the thousands of feet behind them continued to push. Goblins were impaled on the set spears. The spears were dropped, and the bodies fell, and the swords were brought to bear against the horde. The arrows that supported the charging forces were now arched skyward and rained down on the backlines of the goblins, and bodies fell. All was going to plan. The pitched battle was an uphill one, but things were going in the direction of the elves. High in the sky, a sound might change that. There was a shrieking growl that each and every soldier here knew very well. It was the sound of a dragon. It was the sound of the dragon that destroyed the city of Kievstown. They now had a timeline to eliminate the goblins. The soldiers were prepared for this as well, but did not know how big this dragon was, nor how old. As the battle raged, the elves began to make forward progress, though it was slick with blood and bodies of the initially slain goblins. The lack of footholds made the progress slow and plodding. As the sun was beginning to rise, the sky was lighting up, and to their horror, a form took shape in the sky. Thankful, it was in the distance, still flying over the giant lake that was the Dragon Eye Lake. They had minutes to prepare, not hours. 3 short horn bursts sounded along with 2 long ones. These were answered by matching sounds from the mountains above the goblins. 3 white and gray giant birds launched themselves from the peaks just over the entrance to the gates of Kievstown. Each of these massive birds, these rocks, were large enough to carry off and feast on an elephant. They set to intercept this dragon, with the goal of preventing that dragon from reaching the soldiers that fought below. Each rock had a pilot and a goal in mind. Captain Etheros Lundell certainly hoped that they would be enough, but he had his doubts. He couldn't focus on that. The Rock Riders had their charge, and it was a tall task. Based on the damage he witnessed of the city of Kievstown, he suspected it was a fully adult dragon that they had to deal with, if not a clutch of them. He raised his horn to his lips and called for the next formation adjustment. As the horn sounded, forces shift, opening the middle ground up for the archers to take aim. The goblins continued to push forward into the trap. The elves circled around the remaining horde as arrows fired upon the bulk of the remaining goblin forces. They were driven towards the arrows as the elven forces cut down wave after wave of goblin. The goblins' days were numbered, but where was the Skald? She was not there amongst them. In the distance, the Rock Riders held tightly to their mounts. As they charged into battle themselves, the dragon continued to grow in size, and the danger of that battle was continuing to grow. The great beast locked eyes on the three massive birds. With the sunrise behind, he let out a small bit of green mist from his mouth. The mist formed a halo around the dark-scaled monstrosity. The Rock Riders lowered their visors. Each in unison took up a javelin as the dragon set its sights upon the center rock of the three that were flying in intercept course. With a clash of tooth, claw, and beak, the massive black dragon slammed into the center rock. The black and white of scales and feathers spun into the air as two attempted to rend each other asunder. A pair of riders threw javelins at the dragon as they began to turn back in to help their brethren. This massive dragon dwarfed the rock that it was engaged with. The dragon opened its massive jaws and sunk deeply into the throat of the first of three rocks. The rock clawed deeply into the armored chest of the dragon, but the effort was too little as the rock went limp. The monstrosity ripped and tore out the throat of the rock. As the dragon released the rock, the rider hurled one last javelin as the rock fell from the sky, spinning as it fell. The rider was lost to the battle. He did not let out a scream, but did hurl javelins until he was out of reach. Plummeting to his doom, he accepted his fate, watching the other two rocks engage with the battle of the dragon that easily was 4 times larger than the rocks themselves. He simply rose and stroked the neck of the rock that he loved so much, shedding a tear for leading it into battle against a foe that was too much for them. He apologized to the beast and said a prayer to Halafaust as he embraced the fact that he would be crossing Necropsis' gates. The earth greeted him, and all was still. High above the ground, the battle raged on. One of the rocks had managed to grab a hold of the wings of the great beast and bit deeply into the neck of the dragon. Returning bite for bite, the final rock was under the eye of the dragon as it opened its massive jaws and released a torrent of acid towards the rock. The acid flew in the direction of that rock. As she climbed, her rider threw a javelin towards the mouth of the dragon. The javelin found purchase in the maw of the great beast. The dragon snapped its mouth shut, shattering the shaft of the javelin. The beast was falling with the rock on its back, but it was doing its best to angle itself in such a way that it could land. But the trees around the area were going to make things difficult, to say the least. They were coming in fast and hard. There was no graceful way to land with a rock on its back. Not that the rock was doing much damage on its own, but this would be a painful impact, snapping the first few trees off the tops as they crashed deeper into the northern stretches of the Darkwood Forest. The larger the trees became. It was no longer a matter of landing so much of avoiding the bulkiest of trees. The rock was holding onto the dragon, still trying to guide it toward these trees, as the dragon tried very much to avoid them. Crashing down to the earth, the rock made sure that the dragon's head found the earth. On instinct, the black-scaled beast released a fog from its mouth that surrounded itself in a green smoke. This green smoke engulfed the rock and rider. The rider slumped in the saddle, asleep at once. The rock shook its head, trying to fight off the defensive system that the dragon had. The rock had no choice but to release the dragon and lift off to disperse the smoke. No sooner than when the weight of the rock was no longer on the massive wings, the black-scaled beast snapped its head around and released another torrent of acid directly at the rock. This time it did not miss. The rock's scream could be heard miles away. Damaged with melting flesh, but still alive, the massive bird attempted to rise from the canopy of the forest. A whistling sound could be heard from behind the beast. The other rock was in a full dive, and the rider had a wicked-looking spear that they were holding and taking aim with. As the massive black dragon reared, the rider let loose the spear. With the force of the rock's dive, the spear plunged into the chest of the massive black-scaled dragon. The spear plunged into the chest of the massive black-scaled dragon. It let out a scream of pain before the diving rock could slam into the dragon. Claws tore at the dragon. It was wounded badly. The diving rock slammed into the back of the dragon. The diving rock slammed the dragon back onto the ground. On its back, the dragon was still deadly, but not nearly so. The rock and dragon snapped at each other, trying to find purchase. The massive dragon heaved and attempted to roll its long body around to get back on its feet, while the rock continued to hold the monstrosity down. This rock had fought a dragon of its kind before. The rider was experienced. She kept her wings flapping to make sure that poison smoke was nullified. The wounded rock was hurting too bad to stay in the battle, and had to retreat, leaving the battle between the two matched on the ground. Flying back to the city of Kievstown, weak and wounded, in an irregular pattern. He would survive, but what of its mate? It couldn't help, yet there was hope. The war against Callisto was all about hope. And that hope had to spring forth here in Eddie's. And so, they had to defend the city of Durg. Lore Corner. Destruction of Slykin. During Kaelin's rise to power, the land of Slykin was a peace-loving and prosperous land, with rich farmlands and an overly jovial people that called it home. The ruby mines were a great source of wealth and prosperity. This allowed the people of Slykin many opportunities to trade with the rest of Calidria. The Mahdi of Slykin, what would be known as a king or a lord in other territories, used the riches of the mine to have a tower built in the architecture of the tower constructed for magic schools made out of bricks of ruby. Kaelin saw this structure and thought that no other structure would serve him better as a palace as this tower. At this very moment, he moved on Slykin. After his conquest, the people of Slykin became barbaric and tribal, as they lost all stability they had. The influence of Kaelin was strong, and he sought warriors to fuel this conquest that he wished to pursue. War and conflict became all they knew. He destroyed the city of Kadif and cursed it. With the heart of Slykin lost, so too were the people. Using his new stronghold, Kaelin began to push for the rest of Calidria. He had weakened Freduria and had the most powerful houses warring with one another. Slykin was no longer what it once was, and he already had the kingdoms of Devalton, Credo, and Kindor, and Slykin. Only 3 kingdoms remained. With only 3 options, Kaelin set his eyes upon Eddie's. With the forces that Kaelin brought to bear against Eddie's, that left his new stronghold vulnerable. Alistan and the Mage Council knew that they had little time to act to stop Kaelin and take advantage of the situation. Yedrix, the Grand Magus of the Council of Magic, formulated a plan. His plan was to tear the divine spark from Kaelin and bind it. Avestan Tullison, the king of Alistan, was a magus of his own right. Astavan had other plans. Astavan was a specialist in the arts of battle magic. He believed why bind something away when you could destroy it. The debates between Ydrix and Avestan and his camp became heated. Eventually, Saros pulled Ydrix aside and said to him, "Allow Avestan and his fools to try it. We will need the distraction for us to have the greatest chance of success. We have a list of those that have the skills and abilities to work the magic needed. Avestan would be very successful in destroying at least the reserve armies that Kaelin held to bear." Exasperated, Ydrix agreed, so the plans were forged. Ydrix knew something that he had not told his friends. His ritual would require a sacrifice. Ydrix knew that his love, Saros, suspected that there was more to this ritual. Ydrix kept the final portion of the ritual a secret. Ydrix gathered the 13 magus that he needed to perform. Ydrix gathered the 13 magi that he needed to perform the ritual. He shared portions of the ritual that each of them needed and waited for Avestan and his mages to strike so they could do their work. They did not have to wait long as Avestan, furious with the impending fall of Edius to Kaelin, gathered the full magical might of the Alastinian military mages, each master and magus that Natura Adoro had to offer, and all other mages that wanted to participate. They waited for the full moon at the start of Belden's moon to strike. The two rituals began just as Kaelin returned to the Ruby Tower from his conflict with Hallis and Edius. He waited for the final stones to fall that was Edius. Kaelin set his sights on Alastan. He pondered this puzzle. They had the strongest navy, and the military they offered was truly powerful. He began scrying to observe the defenses. During this, he discovered Avestan's ritual as it was beginning. This gave Kaelin a chance to defend himself. The concentration of destructive magic took his entire focus. This was exactly what Saros said would happen, and Ydrix could not have been happier. As Astavan's bombardment began, these conjured meteors came crashing down on the Ruby Tower and crashed upon it with thunderous explosions of fire and stone. The ground shook with each impact. The test of wills between Kaelin and Avestan was tremendous. Kaelin deflected the direct impacts from his tower at the cost of the land around him. Kaelin cared not for the losses around him as long as he survived. As long as he survived this attack, he would have his revenge. What Kaelin was not prepared for was what Ydrix and 13 other mages were up to. Ydrix and the 13 were approaching the climax of the ritual. As Ydrix pulled the final page of the ritual from his robes, Saros knew that his suspicions were about to be confirmed. Saros had wondered where all the needed energy would come from. Ydrix was about to sacrifice himself to ensure the success of the ritual. Though it killed him inside, Saros knew that he could not let Ydrix die in vain. He redoubled his efforts and his focus. As the ritual completed, the final notes of the ritual ended with the scream of Ydrix as he rent his own flesh from the bone to divide Kaelin from his blessings. Kaelin did not feel this energy around him until he saw the face of Ydrix tearing into his body, and he felt his soul pulled from his body, and to his amazement, the sacred flame of divinity stripped from his soul as well. As Ydrix's life ended, so too did the life of Kaelin. Saros collapsed in tears as it was done, not able to pull his eyes away from the neat piles that used to be his love. Completely distraught and unable to comprehend what he was witnessing. Something that looked to be a purple and black worm coiled around these piles and began breathing a purple cloud of mist over what was left of Ydrix. The pieces were pulling together with a shimmering purple flame that returned life to Ydrix, but it was something more than his former self. He had been blessed by Waldron and made a god. This night, a god had died, and another god had been born. At least this was what Saros thought. Waldron looked at Saros and spoke. "You are wrong. A god indeed has been born. However, a god cannot be destroyed in this way. Died Kalen has not. For many ages he will slumber, but he will return. Look to the sky for Belden's moon, to fall shadow with the red cracks in the sky. On that night you will know that Kalen has returned. Saros, you will live to see this day, but your mortal flesh will not age until Kalen has been destroyed." Though Kalen was not destroyed that day, the southern half of Slykin had. The results of Avastan's campaign was not known for 3 days. Once the dust had settled, the Ruby Tower set upon an island. Surrounding this island were where rich and vast lands once were, was a scatter of broken, jagged islands now stood. The land had been destroyed, and the sea had filtered into this region. With what Kalen had already done to this land, this was too much for the kingdom of Slykin to bear. Another thing had happened. With the destruction of the ruby mines, the rubies were broken down to a fine sand. This sand began to wash upon the southern beaches, to be known as the Ruby Coast. Slykin has been left in disarray since. Kalen slumbers, yet not destroyed. The divinity was ripped from his form, but that divine spark could not be destroyed that day. In the tumult, the Ruby Tower still stands to this day. And well, travelers, that is where I will leave you. I hope you enjoyed our little intermission. Durg is still under siege, but will the elves open up the entrance to the south? Meg is still in the wind, but one of the 3 ladies that took her had been dealt with. Regos and Dandros were getting some well-earned training. This is likely the last chance they'll get to do so before things get real. And last but not least, what of the rock and the dragon? Who's going to win that one? We will find the answer to some of these questions in the next episode of the Calmbringer Cycle. I want to thank Adrian von Ziegler for the privilege to use his music to make the story all that much better. For this month's Traveler, I will be making cheddar and chive scones from the Tea and Tales. You can find the recipes of Calidria up on patreon.com. With that said, I want to thank you for listening. And if you wish to support the podcast, a rating where you find the podcast would mean a lot. Or a simple thumbs up in the YouTube space. Subscribe if you really like it. If you want to support a bit more and get the recipes of Calidria in your kitchen, as well as additional lore content, please support me over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/goldenimpn. patreon.com/goldenimpn. Signing up will give you access to the Discord server. I hope to build a great community over there. I can only do that with you, so won't you join us and join the conversation? And if you want to follow me outside the podcast space, you can find me over on Blue Sky at Impish Skald. I am Joe Craig, the Impish Skald. Thank you for listening, and remember, you've been Skald.